He only came in to check the plumbing. Quiet. Professional. In a tailored suit and polished shoes, but the moment he stepped through the door, the clerk behind the counter didn't see a customer. He saw a problem. What happened next would not only expose a painful truth hidden in plain sight, it would also turn the entire office upside down. The door chimed softly as it swung open, letting in a breeze, and a man in a slate-grey suit. He was in his late 40s, tall, composed, with a calm that didn't ask for attention. It simply held it. His shoes were polished. His tie, understated. A leather-bound clipboard rested in his hand, worn at the edges but neatly kept. He stepped inside like someone with purpose, not urgency. Like someone who'd done this many times before. Behind the front desk, the receptionist didn't look up at first. She was scrolling through something on her phone, fingers tapping with idle focus. When she did glance up, her expression flickered, just long enough to register something unspoken. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice clipped, eyebrows raised, not in curiosity, but caution. "Yes, good morning," the man said, offering a polite nod. "I'm just here to—" "We don't take walk-ins," she interrupted, already returning her eyes to the screen. "If you're trying to sell something, we're not interested." His brow lifted slightly, not in offense, but in quiet surprise. "I'm not here to sell anything," he said, still steady, still calm. "I'm just doing a routine check. I won't be long." She gave a dry chuckle, almost scoffing. "Sir, we've had vendors come in all week. You people really don't take the hint." There was no scene, no raised voices, no tension, at least not the kind that could be seen. Just a pause, just a moment where something unsaid stretched between them. He didn't flinch, didn't react. He simply nodded once. "I understand," he said quietly. "Would it be all right if I just waited a few minutes? Someone's expecting me." She sighed. "Fine. Over there." She waved a hand toward the far wall, where two worn chairs flanked a stack of outdated magazines. "But don't bother anyone. And if you're still here in 10 minutes, I'm calling security." He walked over without a word, sat down, crossed one leg over the other, opened the clipboard and began jotting down notes in clean, deliberate strokes. The receptionist glanced at him from behind her desk, whispering something to a younger assistant nearby. The younger woman peeked over, eyes curious, then quickly looked away. To them, he was just another man trying to push a service. Just another face they didn't recognize. Just another suit. But in less than 20 minutes, every assumption in that room would be turned inside out. And the building he was sitting in, the one they thought he didn't belong in, was about to remind them exactly who it belonged to. He didn't stand out. Not in the loud look-at-me way some people do, but he carried something that turned heads when people were paying attention. Today, no one was, or rather, they saw him, but not really. The receptionist leaned back in her chair, arms crossed now, tone sharpened by assumption. "Sir, I'm going to be very clear," she said, eyes narrowed. "This isn't a place for cold calls or canvassing. We're a private property management firm. Appointments are for actual clients." He opened his mouth gently, to clarify. She lifted a hand, palm out, as if fending off a sales pitch that hadn't even begun. "No thank you," she said firmly. "We've had 3 different vendors try to walk in this week. You can leave a flyer if you want, but we're not interested." He paused, not in hesitation, but in deliberation. His gaze swept the space, clean floors, modern lighting, the framed real estate awards on the wall, then back to her. "I understand," he said, voice steady. "I won't be long. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Carlton, or someone on his team." That name landed like a pebble, dropped in still water, a slight ripple. The receptionist blinked once. "You have an appointment with Mr. Carlton?" she asked, her tone now laced with disbelief rather than interest. "Unexpected," he replied. "Nothing more," she scoffed. Not loud, but clear. "I highly doubt that." Another attempt to speak, another interruption. "I don't have time to play phone tag. If you're not on the calendar, you'll need to leave." Still, no anger from him, no protest. Just a quiet shift in his stance, one foot crossing over the other, one hand writing something onto the clipboard, methodically, without rush. The younger assistant at the end of the desk glanced over again. This time, a flicker of unease crossed her face. Something about the man didn't match the story being told. But she said nothing. He glanced back at the receptionist, and nodded once more. Noted, he said simply. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't sarcasm, just a word. Clear, final. She turned away, already reaching for her headset, muttering something under her breath about persistent solicitors. He returned to his seat in the waiting area, resumed his notes, and never looked up again. To her, the matter was closed. Just another day of gatekeeping, of keeping the wrong kind of people out. But down the hall, behind a closed office door, a conversation was about to begin, one that would open far more than just a schedule, and before the hour was out, that same receptionist would be looking at him again. Only this time, she'd really see him. He sat quietly, the clipboard resting on one knee, pen moving in clean, controlled lines. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't idle, just watching, observing, waiting. Across the lobby, the receptionist muttered something under her breath to the assistant beside her. The younger woman glanced over, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. She chose silence. The receptionist rolled her eyes and turned back to her screen. He caught none of it, or at least, gave no sign that he had. His posture was relaxed, one ankle crossed over the other, his shoulders settled into the stiff leather chair, like he had all the time in the world. Around him, the building moved on. A courier dropped off envelopes with a nod. A woman in heels and a headset hurried past, eyes locked on her tablet. A pair of tenants chatted by the elevator about lease renewals and weekend plans. No one looked at the man in the corner. Not really. They saw the suit, maybe. The clipboard, but not the man. He didn't fit the usual mold of someone ignored. But that's exactly what happened. People rarely question their own filters. They just follow them. Minutes passed. The receptionist answered a few calls, greeted another tenant, glanced at him once, then twice, then looked away again. Still there, still quiet, still not gone. Then the phone rang. She picked it up with a huff. "Good morning, Carlton Property Group." Her voice was cheery, then steady, then slightly off. "Yes, sir. He's a pause. Her eyes flicked to the man in the chair. The pen in his hand paused. Just for a second. "Yes, he's here," she said, her voice lower now. "I didn't realize. No, I wasn't told. Of course." The assistant looked up, brows drawing together. The air shifted, just slightly. "Yes, I'll let him know right away." The receiver clicked into place, and for a beat, she didn't move. Then briskly, she stood, smoothed her skirt, and made her way toward him. "Mr. Ellison?" she asked, now, with a carefully arranged smile. "Mr. Carlton is on his way down. He asked me to personally thank you for coming." He looked up, pen resting against the page. His expression didn't change. Not surprised, not smug, just calm. "Thank you," he said simply, rising from his chair, with quiet ease. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" "No, I'm fine." The clipboard closed with a soft snap. Across the lobby, the assistant's eyes widened just slightly. A tenant who had just walked in paused mid-step. The moment had changed, but not loud enough for everyone to notice yet. The elevator dinged, and in the seconds before the doors opened, the receptionist smoothed her hair, adjusted her voice, and tried to remember exactly what she'd said earlier. Because now, it was no longer just a man in a suit. Now, it was someone important. The elevator doors parted, with a smooth hush, and out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, face flushed and moving fast. His polished shoes clicked across the marble floor, with the urgency of someone who knew they were already behind. "Mr. Ellison," he called out, voice a little too loud, a little too desperate to sound casual. "I had no idea you were coming today." The man in the grey suit, Mr. Ellison, turned toward him, expression unchanged. Calm, centered, clipboard still in hand. He didn't need to speak. The weight of his silence filled the lobby faster than any greeting could. The receptionist blinked, her body going rigid behind the desk. The name hit her like a gust of wind, sharp, unexpected, undeniable. Her jaw tightened. Her hands moved to straighten the edge of her keyboard, as if order could undo the last 20 minutes. "I would've, had I known. Of course we would've." The property manager trailed off, catching his breath. "We were told the walkthrough might happen next week." Ellison gave the slightest nod. "That's the point," he said, voice smooth but anchored. "To see how things run, when no one knows who's watching." The lobby stilled. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to quiet. The receptionist stood now, hands clasped, smile frozen in place, but cracking at the edges. Her eyes darted between the two men, trying to piece together a version of the morning that would make sense. One that might somehow excuse what had already happened. It wasn't coming. The manager cleared his throat. "Let's step into my office," he offered quickly. "No need," Ellison replied, his tone light but final. "I've already seen what I needed to." The weight of that statement didn't need explanation. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It simply settled. On her, on the manager, on every space that had underestimated him the moment he walked through the door. He wasn't just visiting a tenant. He was the new landlord, owner of the building. And he hadn't come with an entourage, or a press release. Just a clipboard, and a quiet question: how do they treat people when no one's watching? The receptionist's throat tightened. The assistant beside her didn't speak, just stared. Ellison's gaze moved to her, not angry, not cruel, but precise. "You seemed certain I didn't belong," he said, not loud but enough. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. He looked back at the manager. "I'll follow up later. Right now, I'll finish the walkthrough." The clipboard snapped shut again, and with a quiet nod, he turned and began down the hall. No headlines, no fanfare, just a man in a suit, reclaiming a space he already owned. He didn't ask them to follow, but they did. The manager, a step behind, the receptionist keeping her distance. Ellison moved through the building like he belonged there, because he did. Every step echoed against tile and glass, not with noise, but with certainty. They stopped near a windowed conference room. He turned slowly, the clipboard now resting by his side. No theatrics, no anger, just truth, held steady in his hands. "I bought this building 6 weeks ago," he said quietly. The ink on the paperwork dried 2 Fridays ago. The words landed flatly, no emphasis, no exaggeration, but they shook something loose. The assistant at the front desk glanced up, her lips parting in a soft gasp she didn't realize she'd let out. "I didn't announce it," he continued. "Didn't issue a press release, didn't walk in here with a team or a camera crew. I came in the same way most people do, quietly, respectfully, in a suit, and with a reason." The manager nodded slowly, shame pooling behind his eyes. The receptionist stood still, her face flushed now, hands frozen at her sides. "I wasn't looking for praise," Ellison said. "I wasn't looking for problems either. Just a sense of how people are treated when they don't have a title pinned to their chest." A silence opened in the room, not the awkward kind, but the honest kind, the kind that pulls back the curtain and leaves everyone blinking in the sudden light. "What I saw," he said, voice steady but heavier now, "was someone making a decision about who I must be, based on nothing more than what I look like." No one spoke. "It wasn't personal," he added. "It was practiced, automatic. That's what makes it harder to see, and even harder to fix." The receptionist opened her mouth, but he lifted a hand, not to silence, but to spare. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need awareness." The manager's gaze dropped to the floor. The room felt smaller now. "This isn't just about me," Ellison went on. "It's about the courier, who's dismissed before he's spoken. The maintenance worker talked over. The tenant who walks in every week, and still gets asked who they're here to see." Another beat of silence. "If this building is going to succeed," he said, "it starts with how we see people, not just the ones on the lease. Everyone." There was nothing dramatic in his tone, no bitterness in his voice, but every word carved its place into the room, deliberate and unshakable. He gave a final nod, and turned toward the hallway again. He didn't need to fire anyone. He'd already changed everything. By Friday, the tone in the building had shifted, not in the signage, or the furniture, or the carefully worded emails sent from corporate, but in the pauses, the glances, the way people spoke, and more importantly, the way they listened. Tenants noticed it first. The receptionist stood when people entered now. Her smile wasn't pasted on, but real, tired, maybe, but present. She looked people in the eye, asked their names, remembered them. Down the hall, the assistant who'd once just nodded now, greeted the courier by name, asked how his week was going, held the door open instead of letting it close behind her.
The conversations in the break room were quieter, less sarcastic, more aware. Someone even pulled the company's diversity training binder off the shelf, not because they were told to, but because the silence from earlier in the week hadn't let go of them yet. Mr. Ellison hadn't sent out a memo. He hadn't called a single staff meeting, but his presence lingered like the soft hum of electricity, unspoken but everywhere. The receptionist no longer looked at the door the same way. Each time it opened, her reflex slowed. Her assumptions checked themselves. Not because she was afraid, but because she couldn't forget the stillness of that moment. The way he'd stood there, calm, holding a clipboard like a mirror. She hadn't seen herself until that moment. Now she couldn't unsee it. The property manager started showing up earlier, walking the halls himself, saying hello to tenants he used to wave at from a distance. He began asking questions, real ones, not to defend, but to understand. The usual rhythm of business resumed, but under it, something had broken open, quietly, permanently. By week's end, Mr. Ellison returned, not with a folder or a formal inspection checklist, just a notebook and a short list of names. He didn't comment on the new tone, didn't need to. He simply nodded at the front desk as he passed. This time, the receptionist stood up fully. "Good morning, Mr. Ellison," she said. His eyes met hers. There was no tension, no lingering shame, just a brief respectful pause. "Good morning," he replied. She exhaled, not in relief, but in recognition. She still remembered what he said that day. "I don't need an apology, I need awareness." That's what remained. That's what grew, not from a rulebook, but from a moment. A moment when a quiet man in a suit walked into a building he owned, and revealed what it really meant to lead, not by raising his voice, but by holding up a mirror no one could ignore. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about how we see others, and how often we judge before we understand, don't let the message stop here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your thoughts or your own experience. And if you believe in stories that challenge assumptions and lift up truth, subscribe to Black Roots for more powerful narratives that reveal, inspire, and transform. Because the smallest moment can spark the biggest change.